Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be reviewing, let's take the chair up here, The Light at the End, which is a Big Finish audio story, one of the 50th anniversary stories. This was sent to me by one of my patrons, Unknown289, I believe he's the one who sent this one, if I remember correctly. I think. I know he also requested, one of his Patreon requests was that I listen to it, because it was so much stuff's come in, it was kind of on the back burner. I tend to prioritize TV stuff over audio stuff. But he wanted me to go ahead and give it a listen to, and I said, alright, I'll get on that. And so I have listened to the first disc, because it's a 2-disc set, and I'll give my thoughts on that. It's a nice little multi-doctor story. First off, I like that it seems initially focused on the 8th Doctor. It kind of seems like, of course, he's the furthest along in the timeline. This does have the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th Doctors in it. And he's the one, of course, we initially start out with. He's more kind of the current Doctor. And so he's the one we spend a little bit of time with before Charlie meets up with the 4th Doctor, which is interesting to me because I don't really listen to any of McGann's audio stuff, or I shouldn't say I just haven't, other than the webcast of Shada. And so that I'm not as familiar with Charlie. I know who she is. I know she's one of his popular companions, like Lucy, from his audio stuff, but I've never really experienced her. So this is a nice chance for me to learn some about her. I like how she ends up with the 4th Doctor, and the Doctor explaining regeneration to her, and obviously, this is the point when the 4th Doctor's traveling with Leela. And Leela doesn't know about regeneration, so it's kind of neat. He kind of talks to her about that. Tom Baker sounds great in this, by the way. I love the fact that the 4th Doctor and 8th Doctor get along. When they meet up, and they meet up fairly early on. They're really the only Doctors meeting up we have at this point, halfway through the story. And I really liked it. The 4th Doctor and the 8th Doctor get on pretty well. They seem to go off each other pretty well. They interact well together. I enjoy that. It's always interesting to me how Doctors interact. Some Doctors get along really well, some get along okay, and some don't really like each other at all. The 2nd Doctor doesn't like anybody except the 1st Doctor, it seems like. But I like that 4 and 8 get on. I like when the 4th Doctor has the idea to touch their sonics together to generate enough temporal energy to open the Master's TARDIS. When he's trying to explain to the 8th Doctor, and he's just like, just do it! I tend to like when Tom Baker gets an in his voice like he does sometimes. There is no Charles! I love that. Just do it! Tom Baker can still nail that perfectly. And of course, I'm always happy to hear Tom Baker. He just has that majestic voice. And it is nice, again, to experience a little more of McGann, since most of his stuff is limited to his TV appearances, for me, my experience with him, and his version of Shada. So that's nice, too. It's interesting. It's obviously the Jeffrey Beaver's Master, so the Burnt Master, somewhere between Deadly Assassin and Keeper of Traken is where it seems like this takes place. So it's interesting that they have the Crispy Master, so to speak, with Jeffrey Beaver's back voicing him. There are times where I get a little lost in this, where it starts jumbling, like the first time when Charlie's in the room and it seems like we're hearing snippets of old footage from like Ian and Barbara and stuff. That kind of threw me off. Audio is really the hardest format for me to experience Doctor Who. Because when I'm watching it, obviously I can see it. When I'm reading it, because I grew up reading, I love reading. I've been reading since I was little, even before I could actually read. I liked looking at pictures and old Garfield stuff. I love Garfield. And old Garfield stuff. The first memory I have of reading is actually Garfield. And because of that, I've gotten very good at creating the mental movie in my mind as I'm reading. Like when I'm reading Doctor Who novels, I can picture what's going on in my head. But, books tend to be very detailed about describing what's going on. Robert Jordan could spend a page and a half describing an eye blink, honestly. Over-detailed. And he's one of my favorite writers. So, it's easy for me to mentally imagine what's going on as I'm reading. I tend to love these Target novel books. I've been sent a lot of, Flyattractor especially sent me a lot of the Target novels, and I enjoy reading those. Audio is harder for me. It's hard for me to picture it as as I'm hearing it. For some reason, I have more trouble with that. It's harder for me to engage with audio stories for some reason. Sometimes I wish I had linking narration telling me what's going on. The incidental music in this is phenomenal, which, again, being an audio, it needs to be, because that's all you have to go by is the audio. But the incidental music has been really good so far. I've made note of that in several places. I've been listening to it. I've liked the incidental music. Some of the actors do sound older. Louise playing Leela, she does sound older. Peter Davison sounds older, but that's just kind of one of those willing suspension of disbelief things. You accept it, they are older. You roll with it, you move on. I do like the fact the Fifth Doctor is a little more out of pocket, so to speak, pun intended, in this one, because unlike the others who went to the time they were supposed to go to on November 23rd, 1963, he doesn't. He went 1 minute ahead, so he doesn't end up in the pocket universe. So he's actually at that spot on Earth, and he's got his own little stuff he's going on, meeting the dad of the family, where obviously something's going on there. So he has his own kind of separate thing going on, which I like. With it seems like just Nyssa. He doesn't seem to have Turlough or Tegan with him, but he doesn't seem to realize they're not there. So I'm not sure if this is just him traveling with just Nyssa, like in Spare Parts, or if time is altered because of everything going on, because we've already had Leela and Charlie disappear, and he just doesn't realize they've disappeared. I don't think so, though, because he's not in the pocket universe. We've had a little bit of the Sixth Doctor and a little bit of the Seventh Doctor. They haven't been in as much. Looks like the Sixth Doctor is going back to the Big Bang, which could be a nod to Slip Back, where they also almost went back to the Big Bang. The Big Bang, man, he's been tied up with the Big Bang a lot, because they did that in Castrovalva, too. And then the Seventh Doctor, of course, went out on the planet and is running away from something that's coming after. Probably the same stuff that was coming after 8 at the beginning of the story. It's interesting. This sounds like the first time Ace has really found out about regeneration, because all throughout the story in Part 1, the Doctor, when he's in the TARDIS, is seeing like ghost images of some of the other hymns that are running around. It's interesting how we see that spread out over the story. Like during an 8th Doctor scene, we'll see a ghost of the 7th Doctor scene, and then later we see that scene with the 7th Doctor where he's at, seeing the ghost scene of the 8th Doctor at that point. That's pretty cool. But we haven't had as much of 6 and 7 as we have of the others. And more of the back end of the story seemed focused on 5 here in the first half. And it's interesting to learn that the man's family were 5 at. It looked like the Master killed them, turned them into dolls with his little tissue compressor thing, and left them in the dollhouse. That's brutal. I mean, that means not just the wife, but the kids too, the 5-year-old, the 3-year-old. So I wonder if the Doctor's going to find a way to change that. The idea of a 5-year-old and 3-year-old being brutally killed like that, I don't know if that's something Doctor Who would let stand these days. And the guy obviously does have a memory of the Doctor for some reason. In the beginning of the story, the very beginning of the story, it talks about the TARDIS crash landing on the roof. So I feel like somehow the Doctor's going to save the family. Somehow he's going to go back and save the family. Obviously there's some timey-wimey thing going on here, to coin a phrase, that we don't know about involving him and his family. I figure we'll touch on that toward the end of the story. It'll probably come full circle back to that. The story, again, it's a bit of a jumble. I have trouble following audio. I've liked it. Jeffrey Beavers sounds great as the Master. He seems very sure of himself. Like, there's a lot of talk of time folding in on itself, and somehow his timeline is separating from the Doctor's timeline. It's like he's trying to erase the Doctor, so he won't be tied to that timeline with the Doctor anymore. I'm enjoying it so far. I'm not. Again, I very rarely get quite as excited for an audio story. I loved Jubilee a lot. I really liked Jubilee. But I found Spare Parts vastly overrated. I just couldn't get into Spare Parts. Maybe if I could have seen it. But I just didn't really get into Spare Parts. I liked the crossover with the 4th Doctor and the 10th Doctor, the Out of Time Part 1. I liked that, but I saw it with the animation Josh Snares did with them synced up the audio and his animation synced up. So I did actually get to watch that story, which was also phenomenally good. I love the fact the 4th Doctor tends to get on really well with other Doctors. I love that. And the 10th Doctor does as well. And so I enjoyed that one. So this is really my 4th Big Finish story. And again, I'm struggling a little bit. I'm liking it. But the lack of visuals is causing me some problems. I'm hoping we get some more of 6 and 7 in the second half. So that's my thoughts on it so far. I'm liking the voice work. I want to know more about this Vash race or whatever they're called, the Vast or whatever, wherever this area they're in this pocket universe. Probably something the Master created, kind of like in Castrovalva. And I'm looking forward to finding out more about that. Yeah, I'm actually wearing my TARDIS key that Flyattractor sent me recently in the last package he sent. So that's pretty cool. So I want to know, what do you think of The Light at the End? The whole thing or part 1? Comment down below and let me know. It's always nice to hear from you guys. I want to thank Unknown289 for sending it to me. I'm always excited to experience more Doctor Who, be it novel, audio, or TV. I want to give a shout out to 2 of my top tier patrons, Stephen Crane and the 5th Doctor. I appreciate their continued support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. I also have a P.O. box. If there's anything you would like to send me, you can check that out down in the description below. I also have a link to my Amazon wish list there as well. I update that regularly. Or if you're new here and haven't yet, if you watch the channel regularly and haven't yet, click the subscribe button. That helps me out. Helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And I certainly appreciate that as well. Don't forget to click that like button. Most importantly, though, thank you for watching.